Okay, lesson 11, more photo tricks. We're going to focus on some more stuff for photographers that handle some special use cases. So we're going to look at something called HDR, which is a way of combining multiple exposures to increase the amount of light that is captured or displayed in a single image. We're going to look at creating something called a panorama, which allows us to capture a wider field of view than normal. And then we're also going to look at doing sky replacements in Photoshop along with a special kind of masking called luminosity. While doing these edits, we're going to take a look at how we can do better organizing in Adobe Bridge and produce stuff that looks something like this. All right, when you open up this lessons files, what you're going to find out is that there's a lot of them. There's 44 of them, actually, and it's quite a set of files. And so what we need to do is we want to organize these in a way that's easier for us to see and understand what's going on. It's like we've got 3 files right here in a row, and these are a series of JPEGs used to make an HDR. And then we have the same pictures as raw files to make an HDR. So we can group or stack them together so we can interact with them as a single unit rather than multiple units. Like I'm going to click on this first image, and then I'm going to shift click on this third image and hit Command or Control G to create a stack. Similarly, I'm going to do that same thing for this next 3. So I can come up 2 stacks and I can do group to stacks. Let's get through all of our images. So we have our chapter 11 JPEGs, and we've got 13 of them in a row. Command G. I've got the same ones as raw files, so another 13, Command G. And then we have our sky stack, which I'm just going to leave separate in this case. There's not a huge reason to stack them together, but one is the image for the sky, one is the image for the ground in our other image. Then we also have the ones over here for the do-it-yourself, so why don't we go ahead and stack them as well while we're here. So group and group. Now what we want to do is we want to learn how to interact with these stacks. Like if I click on the top of the stack, I get just one image. But notice if I click on the background one, so there's 2 little boxes right here, and if I click on that background box, that selects everything. So when we're working through this, make sure when you're selecting your stack, you're getting everything in the stack. You can view the contents of the stack by clicking on the number displaying the number of pictures in there, which can be another easy way to get the pictures in there. So you can click onto that one and then shift click onto the end to get all of them. Any method that you want to use to select all of them is just fine. Let's grab this second stack right here, the one of the raw files. I know they're raw files because it's a .cr2, which is an older Canon raw file format. And let's go ahead and load these into Camera Raw to make an HDR file. And I'm going to do that by clicking the little icon right here. It launches Camera, and we can see when I was taking these pictures, what I did is I took an exposure for the lower part, and I took an exposure for the sky, so that I can have good tones in both of them. But I can't capture everything well in a single image. And even if I try to come through and start bringing it back, in the highlights, I've still lost a lot of detail that just isn't going to come back. Versus if I come over here where I've kept all of that detail and I start trying to crack open those shadows, I start having those same kind of problems in the lower part of the image. And in this case, I also start getting a lot of image noise. So what you can do as a photographer is you can take a middle exposure, a upper exposure, or a lower exposure. Sometimes it's done with 2, sometimes it's actually done with 5 images. And it's a way of capturing a full range of tones. In fact, you might have had this problem yourself when you're shooting with your phone. You take a picture of like a bright dynamic sunset or a selfie in front of it, and either your face is correctly exposed or the sky is correctly exposed. So this is a way of dealing with that. Although a lot of newer camera phones these days actually take 2 exposures and blend them together for you now, which is a neat trick. Okay, so I'm going to select all 3 of these. So I clicked on the first one, and I shift clicked on the last one, and then I will right click on the image, and I will do merge to HDR. Now these are big beefy files, so it'll take it a hot minute to merge them together. That's going to be true for a lot of these pictures today. So like I've downsized them all a little bit to try to make this run faster on less powerful computers. If you're running on a less powerful computer, this might take a while for it to load. We get the HDR merge preview. The preview in here actually works pretty well. So like align images, if I hadn't shot these on a tripod, sometimes there's slight movements. We try to address that. Apply auto settings. It's looking at the 3 pictures and it's trying to automatically figure out what I want to retain. And then we have something called deghost. And deghost is where it will remove stuff that's only present in 1 or 2 of the images. So let's say some guy was walking in the first image, but had walked out of the frame by the other 2. The deghost would try to remove that movement. In this case, I didn't capture anybody that way. We're going to click merge. It's going to ask us where to save it. I'm just going to go ahead and throw it in the folder that we were working from. And it's going to spit out a new file that's in .dng format. And .dng format, is the open source version of a RAW file. So like each camera brand has their own RAW file, like NEF for Nikon, CR2, CR3 for Canon. I want to say Hasselblad's like H3C or D or something like that. Fuji's RAF, and that's part of why you have to update Photoshop so often, is because when they make new cameras, you have to update Photoshop in order to access those newer RAW formats. It's an interesting trick. Anyway, so that's how we made that raw image. Go ahead and play with these settings on your own based on what we did in the last lesson and see if you can edit this in a way that you happen to like. When you're done with your edit, go ahead and click Done to save your edits to your ACR, to your new, DNG file. Now this DNG file is the one that I want to keep and use later. So I'm going to go ahead and, Command 8? Yeah, hit Command or Control 8 to mark this one later to put in a done folder. All right, let's make a panorama in Camera. So I'm going to come over to this one and I'm going to click on that bottom image. So I've got all 13 selected, and I'll go ahead and send this to Camera. Again, I know I have the right one because it says .dng at the end. This is where I had to resize these down to make this a little bit easier for less powerful computers to run. I'm going to select all of these images. So I have the first one active, and I'll shift click on the last one. I'll right click on any of them, and I'm going to pick Merge to Panorama. We get something that looks like this, and we've got two options for filling these edges in. We'll look at one of the other ways of doing it when we do the JPEG version of it. In Camera, we have a couple of interesting methods for fixing this, which is we can just simply use boundary warp, and it will modify and stretch that in for us. Similarly, we can also try fill edges, and it will use content aware to fill in these areas. This often crashes, so I don't like to use it. Similarly, we have spherical, which is another way of processing these same files and boundary warping them. And then we also have perspective, which generally doesn't work. Yep. The one I tend to use is cylindrical for most of my edits. You can also use auto crop to remove anywhere that is empty to kind of get rid of that extra extraneous stuff. Generally, what I like to do is I like to boundary warp, or the trick we'll use later on the other one, I'll use content aware fill to block in those other areas. When you're happy with your options, we'll do cylindrical boundary warp 100. We'll click Merge. We'll save it to the same folder. And we'll click, you'll want to go through and edit this as you would edit normally. You want to do your editing later, by the way, because like if I edit these all slightly different, I end up with weird banding in my final image. But you'll probably want to do things like come out and like those shadows look a little dark. Maybe I want to apply a special kind of sky filter on here and grab the sky and darken it out. But what you really want to do with this one is experiment. Like what do you like in terms of the appearance of this image? When you're done, click Done, and that will save an ACR file, a DNG file, new one for the panorama. Let's go ahead and mark this one Command 8 or green. I can also right click on it to get to label, and I can label it green that way for approved. Okay, so how do we do this without RAW files? So we can also do this directly in Photoshop, but since these are made out of JPEGs, what you'll notice is after you'll edit them later is that the edits won't be as successful. Like we don't have as much information. So I'm going to select this first one with the JPEGs, and I'll go to Tools, and I'll go to Photoshop, and I'll go to Merge to HDR Pro. HDR Pro is a pretty old tool these days. It's a little clunky. It's not very clear how to use, and it only works okay. And that's because a lot of times people now will use separate programs to merge to HDR rather than Photoshop, but it is available to you. And if you are merging to HDR, please use RAW files. It just comes out better. We have that same remove ghost. We have different ways of changing how it brings in those images for us. Like how does it understand the information? Usually you use local adaptation. You can bump it down to 8-bit if you want a smaller image. You can bump it up to 32-bit if you want to be able to drag out more information from it. Just know that 32-bit is not going to play nice with most tools, so most people stick in 16-bit. You can also overbake it by clicking on things like radius and strength to make it kind of nasty looking. That was a thing for a while. I don't know why it was, but it was a thing for a while. Anyway, edit out your JPEG to taste from here, and then go ahead and click OK. And try editing it in Photoshop a little bit and see what you can get. So like if we come over to our adjustments and we start putzing around with hue saturation, we can immediately see that it's nothing like that temperature that we were using in Camera On. It's because we just don't have that same amount of color information and flexibility that we had from our other image. Go ahead and save this as a JPEG. To do that, you'll go to File, Save a Copy, and you'll pick JPEG out of the dropdown, and we are going to add this to our folder on the desktop. Now notice that right off the bat, it changed the name of this to Untitled HDR to JPEG. So one way to quickly get a useful file name, so like here we have one of the files for it, Chapter 11 Book Pano, whatever. If I click on this, that loads that up as the file name. And so now it's labeled that 01. The final, so I don't want the Pano, excuse me. We want the HDR. HDR1. And in order to show what images are in it, I'll do -3. So I now am marking that I made this from these 3 images in the file name, which is a good way to name these kind of files. And I'll go ahead and click Save. And OK. I don't need this anymore. I will close it. Back to Adobe Bridge. Let's do the same thing from let's do the same thing for our panorama. So I'll click on the back image for this one. So I've got all 13 of these JPEGs active. It's pretty similar again. I'll go to Tools. I'll go to Photoshop, and I will go to Photo Merge this time. This is also a pretty old tool in Photoshop. It hasn't changed much recently. It works okay. Again, there's separate programs that do this a little bit better than Photoshop. Some of these settings will be familiar from the raw version of it. In this case, I am going to pick cylindrical, and I'm going to turn on these 3, and I'm going to leave content or wheel fill off. This tool really likes to crash. And each one of these things that you turn on increases the likelihood of it crashing, particularly this last one. I found these first 3 tend not to crash, but this 4th one tends to crash. And it's also just resource intensive. So what we're doing here is we're saying a cylindrical distortion rather than perspective or spherical. Again, generally for most of these kind of landscapes, I really like cylindrical. Blend images together, so where there's the seams, it's going to try to match everything together and hide that there's a seam there. Vignette removal, this is like what we did with that optical button in Camera Raw, where it removes that vignette. And then geometric distortion is the other part of that optical distortion as well. Content aware fill areas would fill anywhere that's empty. We're going to do this manually as a step on our own. We can actually do every single one of these clicks right here as its own step. It's just easier to do it all at once. So we'll click OK. And just like with the other thing, we don't really want to click or touch anything. Photoshop's going to think about its life here for a minute as it goes through to combine all these images. Yours might take a little bit longer than mine. I've got a pretty big, beefy computer here. When I was doing this kind of stuff in college, this would take a very long time because we do like 200-300 wide image panoramas, and it would just take forever. In fact, we used to just start it and then go to lunch and come back. We used to rate our panoramas for the number of sandwiches we could eat while it was processing. I'm going to go ahead and fast forward through this section on the video while it's thinking about its life. Okay, we see that it's outputted a panorama that looks pretty similar to the one that we didn't do the one before we did the boundary work on this one in Camera Raw. And we want to fill in the surrounding area. The first thing I'm going to do to fill in that surrounding area is actually I'm going to get rid of all these layers, and we can see how it's distorted each one of these images and then it's taken little chunks of it to make up our panorama. This takes up a lot of room, and there's not a lot of benefit to having this unless you see a lot of distortions down here that you need to fix. So I'm going to go ahead and merge these together. So I'm going to go up to Layer, and I'm going to pick Merge Visible. I don't want to do Flatten, because if I do Flatten, this clear space here will turn white, but I want to keep it transparent. So I'll do Merge Visible. You can see that drops us down to a single layer. Now we need to select this empty area. So I'm simply going to Command-click on my layer preview. And then I'm going to invert my selection. And then I'm going to check for something. I'm going to hold down Z on my keyboard and zoom in. When I'm filling in transparent areas like this, I want to check for aliasing, because if there's any aliasing right here, I would need to modify the selection. So you see how I have this nice hard pixel edge? So I don't need to modify this. But if any of these were semi-transparent and I tried to fill this right now, I'd end up with like a weird white line here. To prevent that, you would go up to Select, Modify, and then either expand or contract depending on your selection by 2 or 3 pixels, and that should take care of any aliasing that's in there. In this case, this did not introduce any aliasing. I'm going to hit Command-0 to fit this back on my screen. Now for this one, I don't want to use generative fill. I just want to use content aware fill. So I can access that from the paint bucket and picking content aware fill, or I can come up to edit and I can go to fill, not content aware fill, but fill. And that gives me the option to also pick it from this drop down, and I'll click OK. And again, like we've talked about other content aware tools, it's going to look at stuff present in the image, and it's going to use that to fill in these areas without adding anything new or novel. I'll go ahead and hit deselect. That doesn't look bad. Again, try playing around with it with some of these tools and see how it behaves differently from the panorama that we did in Camera Raw. When you're happy, go ahead and go up to File and go to Save a Copy. And pick JPEG and save that into your file. First, let's change that file name. So I am going to click on this first one. We can see that gives me chapter 11, book, panel, blah, 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 blah. At the end, I'm going to do -13 to say that it is images 1 through 13. And I'll click Save. And then OK. Not super hard. So let's take a look at another fancy thing that we can do in Camera Raw. So I'm going to click Don't Save. And I'm going to switch back to Bridge. And what I want to do is I want to take this foreground and this sky and combine the two. So we're going to open both of these up at the same time in Camera Raw. So click on one, shift click on the other, and send to Camera Raw. Now, unlike with the panoramas, we are going to edit these before trying to merge them together. So if this first one active, I am going to go up to exposure. Oh, first actually, excuse me. Optics, yes, yes. So remove chromatic aberration, use profile corrections. Then we'll go to light, then we'll go to exposure, bump this up by 0.8. And when I'm editing this, I'm just looking at the ground because that's all I'm going to keep. And I'm going to go to temperature, color, and I'm going to change temperature to be 4,900. And I'm going to change my tint to be 30. And then under effects, I'm going to change this to be 5 and 5 for clarity and dehaze. Let's make the sky image active. And we're going to come over to light. And we're going to bump the contrast by 10. And we're going to increase our white tones by 30. We're going to go down to color, and I'm going to bump my tint from 8 to 12. And I'm going to go down to effects, and I'm going to bump my clarity from 0 to 10. Now, I only want to open one of these images in Photoshop. I don't want to open up the other one. So I'm going to make just this first image active, and I'm going to click Open. Note that it will save any edits that I made to the other one in Camera Raw, but it will not open it here in Photoshop. Now, to replace the sky in this, it used to be a series of selections and tedious masking and modifications based on adjustment layers and stuff. But maybe 6-7 years ago, they added an automatic version of it. To add it automatically, I'll go to Edit, and I'm going to go to Sky Replacement. You can see in my case, it remembers that I did this in the previous past. But you would click this drop down and you'd click add to add back in the sky from where you have it saved on your computer in order to replace the sky on here. With this still open, we want to make a couple of quick little adjustments. So for shift edge, I'm going to bump this by 45. And for fade edge, I'm going to bump this to 20. And then for sky brightness, I'm going to do 15 to bring that sky up a little bit. Finally, I want to bring back some of the horizon line from this sky image that was present in it. So I'm going to click and drag up. And while I'm dragging up, I'm going to drag up until I just start seeing a little bit of ground right here on the right. And this will help get the atmospheric perspective on here to look correct when merging these two images together. Output to new layers is fine. I'll click OK. This is a pretty good base image to start working from. And so if you don't have access to continue to work on something like this in RAW, a really powerful way to work on images, particularly landscapes, less so like human skin it doesn't do a great job on, is something called a luminosity mask. Let's collapse down the sky replacement group. You can see all the layers it made to do this. And we're going to make a special kind of selection called a luminosity selection. So click off to the side so nothing's active, or go up to layer and deselect all layers. Go to channels over here in your panels, and you're going to click the little circle. And what this will do will select everything that is brighter than 50% gray, and it's going to do that as a soft transition. So like it all the way from black to white in terms of how powerful the selection is or how much something is selected. Then I'm going to go over to adjustments and I'm going to click on curves. And we can see it loaded that selection as a layer mask. So it's a black and white version of my thing. And I can start modifying the contrast of this. Now, curves is pretty neat. I can drag up on it to brighten. And if I drag up on the left, it brightens the dark tones. On the right, it brightens the upper tones. And I can drag down to do the same thing. I can add in as many little dots on here as I want for my adjustments. And I can also tell it to target individual color channels. Like if I wanted to add red, I could grab this red one and be like, please brighten that red subpixel or please darken that red subpixel. So this can be a very powerful way to edit color as well. In our case, we're going to stick in RGB. And I am going to click once here towards the top right and drag up a little bit. If you want yours to match the output of mine, I'm going to go right here where it says input, and I'm going to put in 190, and I'm going to do output 200. And then I'm going to click and drag down on the left side of this line. And I'm going to, if you want it to match mine exactly, I'm going to do 60 and 45 for those numbers. And what I've done is I've created a very gentle S curve in here. And if I click this on and off, we can see that it makes my brights a little bit brighter. And then it takes my midtones, not my shadows, just my midtones, and darkens them, creating the illusion of deeper color and tone and saturation. So it's a really good way to edit these kind of images. In fact, we could probably take this one a little bit further and make it a little too punchy. But it all comes down to your own taste. When you're happy with this one, go ahead and go up to File and save it as a PSD. And so I'm just going to actually take out foreground. So it's actually my sky replacement. And yes, that's fine. I don't need this file anymore once it's done saving. Yes, go ahead and close it when you're done saving. Thank you very much, Photoshop. I'm going to come here to Bridge, and I want to mark the files that I would want to put in for like delivery or send off to somebody. So I've got my HDR JPEG that I forgot to mark earlier. So Command or Control 8 to mark it green. So I've got JPEG HDR. I've got my RAW HDR. I've got my RAW, panorama. I want my JPEG panorama as well. So Command 8 to show me which one it is. And then I have my sky replacement over here. It's still thinking about its life, but I'm going to hit Command 8 to mark that one as well. Let's see if I can force it to load. No, it's being mad. Well, it would load here correctly once the cache reloads. Go ahead and right-click in the space to make a new folder and label this Done or something else similarly descriptive. Click, Command click or Control 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 click. I've got my 5 images. I'll drag them into my Done folder, and I'm going to then right-click and pick Compress. Note that I did all of this in Bridge rather than in File Explorer or Finder, because this will keep all of those hidden files with my main files together. And that's it for this chapter. Not too bad, but just again, some more tricks that photographers will really appreciate and use.